Penguin Random House Audio presents Flex, the Art and Science of Leadership in a Changing World. This is the author, Jeffrey W. Hull. Introduction. The weather was nearly perfect. The view of San Francisco from the air must have been stunning and exciting for the 70 students who were traveling from Seoul to attend a music exchange program. But in the final moments, everyone on that Boeing 777 sensed something was amiss. As survivors recounted later, the ground outside their windows looked close enough to walk right out onto the seawall below. At exactly 11:28 a.m. on the morning of July 6, 2013, Asiana Airlines Flight 214 crashed into the wall that separates San Francisco Bay from the runway. Miraculously, all but 3 of the passengers survived, but there were hundreds of serious injuries. In the aftermath of the first deadly crash in the United States in 5 years, and the first for a 777, the 3 pilots struggled to get their stories straight. Even in the best of conditions, the roles of the flight crew can vary greatly depending upon seniority, the choice of seat, and who is designated the pilot in command. Yet there is one thing that they had trained for. When you see something that's not right, you speak up, even if it means contradicting a senior officer or the pilot manning the controls. The fact that they were fast approaching the wall before they had cleared the runway was evident within the cockpit and even from miles away. The disastrous landing was caught on video by bystanders from across the bay. The pilot at the controls said later that he was uncomfortable with making a visual approach. As the automatic pilot controls malfunctioned, he had to look out the window, gauge the timing, speed, and elevation, and land the plane the old-fashioned way. But neither of the ancillary pilots spoke up at the time, even though one of them, a seasoned veteran with thousands of hours of flight time on large jets, noticed that they were coming in too fast and low for a good landing. When the 3rd pilot shouted out, "Go round," meaning do not land and take the plane around to try again, they were only 4 seconds from impact. Too little. Too late. Why did no one speak up earlier? 3,000 miles away on an equally sunny afternoon, in the bowels of one of America's largest and most prestigious hospitals, I was interviewing a seasoned anesthesiologist about the very topic that caused Flight 214 to crash. Pure coincidence, of course, but memorable nonetheless. May P.N. Smith, a specialist in OB/GYN clinical practice, had just finished publishing the results of one of her first studies on the risks inherent within the hierarchical dynamic in a typical operating room. I had just observed my first operation, during which I sat in awe of the complex dance taking place between the surgeons, the anesthesiologists, the nurses, and the technicians who run the multiple computers and robotic equipment that make up today's operating rooms. The 20-something man on the table was awake and chatty as they rolled him in. Tom was proud of the tattoos that all the nurses were oohing and eyeing over. His chatter diminished when one of them brought up the reason he was there: a highway motorcycle accident during which he had been thrown 50 feet, breaking his clavicle after trying to outrun a tractor-trailer. As the anesthesiologist put him under, his last words were, "Thanks, docs. I'll be more careful next time." Truth be told, I was more interested in observing the hierarchy, which was clear from the moment I entered the room, than reflecting on the testosterone-fueled road rage that may have caused this situation. The attending surgeon was top dog, even though he never lifted a knife. A resident surgeon performed a surgery, barking orders to the OR nurses, the CRNA, certified registered nurse anesthetist, and the attending anesthesiologist. The attending surgeon admonished the resident for sewing up the patient a bit too fast, so that the stitches appeared, at least to him, a bit sloppy. The attending was known for his meticulously neat stitches, and this resonance work, and any scars that remained, would forever carry his signature. Later, when I was discussing this dynamic with May, one of the lead anesthesiologists in the training of new docs in the OR, I asked, what happens when one of the staff disagrees with the attending surgeon? Do they ever speak up? I was familiar with the truism that your typical surgeon does not appreciate being contradicted. Probably not in general, and certainly not during an operation. That's when May shared her research on the challenges of minimizing surgical and physician errors. The facts were sobering. Hundreds of post-mortem studies of OR mishaps showed that the sacrosanct power of the lead surgeon all too often led to avoidable, sometimes harrowing mistakes when other members of the team failed to speak up. The good news, as May recounted, was that team dynamics in hospitals across the country and the globe were evolving. Since 2001, new training programs and protocols had come into play, and simulation programs were put in place to educate young physicians on how to work in teams with respect for the traditions and the hierarchy, but equal respect for observing, acting, and speaking on behalf of the patient. If something is amiss, and someone lower on the totem pole sees it, they are encouraged, no, obligated, to speak up. The days when no one would speak up in the face of the alpha dog are dwindling. Of course, tradition dies hard. Despite a fresh awareness of the importance of teamwork, it naturally remains a challenge for junior or less experienced clinicians to speak truth to power. As I observed the dance of surgery firsthand, I could totally understand. I know that I would be hard-pressed to speak up in the face of the dominating surgeon. He was clearly in charge, and the rest of us were there to do his bidding. For the most part, that is exactly as it should be. Until it isn't. For his best-selling book, Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell researched fatal crashes in which pilot error was the determining factor. He found that the core problem with the cockpit dynamic was that many cultures have such a deeply entrenched respect for hierarchy and the wisdom of experience that no matter how well they are trained, junior officers would defer to a superior, even if there was something noticeably awry. His assessment was that many of these crashes would not have happened if the pilots were not only trained, but also acculturated to focus on what was right and not so much on who was right. Gladwell was making an astute observation about how deeply ingrained our cultural values can be, and there will always be, under certain circumstances, a need for decisive leaders who can handle tough situations, make quick decisions, and save the day. But I think reluctance to stand up to a leader is not just a cultural artifact. It's just plain human, a result of thousands of years of patriarchal norms. Fortunately, as May's research indicates, and my experience at dozens of hospitals, nonprofits, and corporate organizations, from startups to the Fortune 100, confirms the world is changing. Alpha types often still run the show, but they are also a dying breed. Organizational models comprised of circles and networks are rapidly replacing the old standby pyramid. Research on the values of millennials, usually defined as the cohort born between 1981 and 1996, indicates that, like every generation, they can be complex. In general, they desire less hierarchy and more of a meaningful, collegial, partnership-oriented culture and work environment. Yet, about 70% also say they want guidance from their leaders and appreciate following the vision of a seasoned expert. They want mentoring from someone with expertise. Basically, they want a boss, but not an alpha, a beta boss. By beta, I don't mean the stereotypical moniker for someone who is passive or subordinate. There is an emerging recognition that people with less directive, less authoritative styles can be equally valuable and impactful in leadership roles.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?